Hello, my name is Scarlett. I am a student of English. I want to tell you about my journey, how I learned to speak English naturally. At first I was shy. I was scared to make mistakes. But now, I speak with confidence, and I want to help you do the same. When I was 16, I sat by the window of my room one rainy afternoon, holding my English notebook in one hand and a pencil in the other. I had a big dream. I wanted to speak English naturally, not just for school or exams, but in real life. I wanted to walk into a room and speak with confidence. I wanted to watch movies without feeling lost. I wanted to make new friends from different countries. But at that moment, all I felt was stuck. Every time I opened my mouth to speak English, the words didn't come out. My brain froze. My heart beat faster, and the only thing that came out was silence. I remember sitting there thinking, why is this so hard? I had studied grammar rules. I had learned so many vocabulary words. But still, something was missing. I didn't sound natural. I didn't feel natural. I felt like I was reading from a textbook, not speaking from my heart. That's when I made a simple decision. I closed my notebook and put the pencil down. I grabbed my phone, opened YouTube, and searched for a short English vlog. I didn't want a lesson. I just wanted to hear someone speak English the way they normally do. I found a girl talking about her morning routine. She spoke fast, but her words had a rhythm. It sounded soft, easy, and clear. I didn't understand every word, but I kept watching. She smiled while speaking. She laughed at small things. She used simple phrases like, let's make some coffee, and it's a little cold today. It didn't sound like a script. It sounded real. I played that video again and again. Then I played another one. That night, instead of reading my English book, I listened. I listened to native speakers talk about their daily life. No grammar, lessons, no stress, just real conversations. I lay in bed with my earphones in, the room dark except for the soft glow of my phone screen. I listened to how they said things, not just what they said. I started to notice patterns, like how people say gonna instead of going to, or how they use like in the middle of a sentence when thinking. I didn't try to remember every word. I just let the sound sink in. Every morning. After that, I made a promise to myself. I would listen to at least 10 minutes of English, just like listening to music. While brushing my teeth, I played short podcasts. While making my bed, I turned on English songs. On the bus to school, I listened to people talking about their lives. I wasn't trying to study. I was just making English part of my day. In the beginning, I felt lost. The words moved too fast, but I didn't give up. Slowly, I started catching phrases. I would smile when I recognized a word I had learned before. I started saying them quietly to myself, like little whispers, "That's awesome," or "I'm not sure." It became a game. How many phrases could I catch in one video? My parents didn't know what I was doing at first. They saw me walking around the house with one earphone in, smiling at nothing. My little brother asked me, "Are you listening? To songs or stories?" I laughed and said, "A little bit of both." Because to me, those voices were not just lessons. They were stories, music, and practice all at once. As days passed, I noticed something amazing. In class, when the teacher asked questions, I started understanding more. When we watched English videos in school, I didn't feel as confused. I began to pick up new phrases without trying hard. I realized that listening every day had trained my ears and my brain. I no longer had to think in my first language and then translate. Some English words started to feel natural. One evening, I was sitting with my cousin Emily, who speaks English very well. She said, "Scarlett, your accent sounds a bit different now. You speak smoother." That small comment made me feel proud. I smiled and told her, "I've been listening to English every single day." She said, "It shows." That made me feel stronger inside. I still made mistakes, of course. I still forgot words. But I felt closer to the language. It didn't feel like a stranger anymore. It felt like something I could understand and enjoy, even love. I made playlists of my favorite English speakers. Some were funny, some were serious. Some talked about food, others talked about travel. I learned how people really talk, not just the words, but their tone, their pauses, and even their laughter. I started noticing how they changed their voice when asking a question, how they smiled when saying something kind, and how they used short, clear sentences when explaining things. One day I was sitting by myself at the park. I had my earphones in, listening to a podcast about pets. A little girl walked by with her puppy, and the dog came close to me. The girl smiled and said, "Sorry, he's just curious." Without thinking, I smiled back and said, "That's okay? He's cute?" And then I froze. I had just answered in English, naturally, without fear, without translation. It was a small sentence, but to me, it felt like a big step. After that moment, I knew I had changed. Listening every day had made a difference. I didn't sound perfect, but I was no longer afraid of English. I was starting to enjoy it. I was starting to feel it. My favorite time to listen was in the evening, just after dinner. I would sit at my desk with my small lamp on, my notebook nearby. I still didn't write much, but I sometimes paused the video or podcast and repeated what the speaker said. I would say it out loud, trying to match their tone. I didn't always get it right, but it felt fun. I wasn't studying. I was practicing. Like a singer learns a new song, by listening and repeating. And then one day, as I was brushing my hair in the mirror and listening to an English video, I caught myself doing something surprising. I was repeating full sentences. Not just words, sentences. I was even moving my hands like the speaker. I laughed at myself, but deep inside, I felt proud. That's when a new idea entered my mind. If listening helped me this much, what if I started talking to myself too? I was already used to hearing English in my ears. But could I now start speaking it on my own? I looked at myself in the mirror. My hairbrush in hand, I stood there and said softly, "Hi, my name is Scarlett. I'm learning English." Then I laughed nervously. It felt funny, but also exciting, so I kept going. I looked around my room and said, "This is my desk. That is my lamp. I like this book." I didn't care if I made mistakes. No one was watching. And just like that, my journey moved to the next level. The night I first spoke to myself in the mirror, I felt something change. It was a quiet change, like a soft wind brushing past your face when you're not expecting it. I had been listening to English every single day, like it was music, and now those words I had heard so many times were starting to slip out of my mouth without force. They were shy at first, like tiny birds testing their wings, but they were flying. And even if no one else could see it, I felt it inside me. Something was waking up. After I said those first few sentences in the mirror, I smiled at my reflection and whispered, "This feels strange, but I like it." I knew it was silly. I mean, who talks to themselves like that? But somehow, it felt good. It felt brave, like I was doing something new, something that could lead me somewhere I had never been before. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need a teacher. I just needed me, my voice, and a little bit of courage. The next morning, I woke up and decided to try again. As I made my bed, I talked about it. Now I'm fixing the blanket. These pillows are too soft. I like the blue one. My sentences were short, sometimes awkward. But I didn't stop. I spoke slowly and clearly, just like the people I had been listening to in all those videos. It wasn't perfect. In fact, it was far from perfect. But it was mine. My English, my way. I went to the bathroom and started brushing my teeth. Toothbrush in hand, toothpaste foam in my mouth, I looked into the mirror and mumbled, "I'm brushing my teeth. They look clean today." I even chuckled at how ridiculous it sounded, but I kept going. After all, no one else could hear me. I was safe in my little world where mistakes didn't matter and trying was enough. In those quiet mornings, I discovered something powerful. I didn't need someone else to practice with. I didn't need a perfect environment or a classroom. I could create my own English practice space, right there in my home, in my mind, and with my voice. And every time I talked to myself, I felt just a little more confident. I started doing it everywhere. While getting dressed, I would say, "This shirt is nice, but maybe I'll wear the red one." While cooking with my mom, I would whisper under my breath, "Now I'm cutting the onions, they make me cry." My mom probably thought I was singing to myself or repeating some TikTok phrase, but I was actually having a conversation with myself. A silly, tiny, private conversation in English. Sometimes I'd walk around the house with my phone in hand, pretending I was on a call. I'd say things like, "Yes, I'll be there in 5 minutes," or "Sorry, I can't talk now, I'm busy." I practiced the rhythm, the tone, the natural sound of these lines I had heard 100 times in videos and movies. And little by little, I started to sound more natural. My voice didn't shake as much. My words didn't get stuck. Even when I was outside, I found moments to talk to myself, like when I was walking to the grocery store. I'd see something and quietly comment on it in English. "That's a cute dog. I like her jacket. The clouds look heavy today." These weren't deep thoughts. They were simple, everyday sentences. But they were practice. And I was using English not just as a subject to study, but as a way to see and describe the world around me. The fun part was creating little situations. In my head, I imagined I was in a store in New York, trying to buy something. I'd play both sides of the conversation. "Hello? Can I help you?" "Yes. I'm looking for a blue sweater." "Here's one. Do you like it?" "Yes, it's nice. How much is it?" And just like that, I'd create an entire scene. I could do it while folding laundry, while washing dishes, or even while waiting for a bus. These scenes felt like small movies in my head, and I was the actress, the director, the writer. I controlled the story, and I used it to grow my voice. But let me be honest. There were times I felt foolish. Sometimes I would be mid-sentence and think, "What am I doing? This is so silly." I'd feel shy, even though I was alone. I'd hear my own voice and feel embarrassed. But then I'd remind myself why I was doing it. I wasn't doing this to impress anyone, I was doing it for me. For the girl who used to be scared to say even one word of English out loud. For the girl who listened quietly, but never dared to speak. That girl deserved to be heard. One time I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. I was softly repeating something I had heard in a video earlier that day. Something like, "Let's get started, shall we?" I said it 3 or 4 times, just trying to get the right tone. Then I turned around, and my dad was standing there holding an apple. He looked at me and raised one eyebrow. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. I blushed hard. "Oh, just practicing English," I said, trying to laugh it off. He smiled. "That's good," he said simply and walked away. That was all he said. But in his small smile, I felt a kind of encouragement. He didn't laugh. He didn't tease me. He just accepted it. That gave me more strength. Maybe talking to myself wasn't silly after all. Maybe it was brave. So I kept doing it. I made it a habit, like brushing my teeth, like making my bed. Every day I'd talk to myself for at least 10 minutes in English. Sometimes it was in the morning, sometimes before bed. I'd stand in front of the mirror, look myself in the eyes, and say things like, "How are you today, Scarlett?" Then I'd answer myself, "I'm okay, a little tired, but I'm learning." It became a kind of therapy, a way to connect with myself, a way to feel strong and safe while trying something new. And then something beautiful happened. One day, I was in a cafe with my cousin Emily. We ordered drinks, and the girl at the counter asked, "Would you like that hot or iced?" Before Emily could answer, I said, "Iced, please." It came out so naturally, so calmly. No fear, no pause. Just like I had practiced in my room 100 times. Emily turned to me and said, "You're getting really good at this." I smiled. "Thanks. I talk to myself a lot." She laughed. "You mean like all the time?" "Every day," I said proudly, because I wasn't just talking to myself. I was building a voice, a confident, clear, and natural voice, and I knew, deep inside, that voice would take me somewhere special. Now I had learned to hear English like music, and I had learned to speak it to myself like a quiet friend. But I wasn't ready to stop there. Something inside me whispered, "What if you started using English in your real life, outside your bedroom, outside your mirror? What if the world could be your practice ground?" After that day at the cafe with Emily, something inside me felt different. It wasn't just the way I answered the question at the counter. It was how natural it felt, how easy the words came out. I didn't freeze, I didn't doubt myself, I just spoke. And for the first time, I believed it wasn't luck, it was growth. Real, steady growth, but I also knew I wasn't perfect. I still stumbled over hard words. I still paused when a sentence felt too big for me. I still got nervous when someone talked too fast. And sometimes, when I didn't understand something, I'd just smile and nod, pretending I got it. Deep down, I knew I needed to grow stronger. I needed to build something steady, a foundation I could stand on, no matter how fast or loud the world around me spoke. That's when I decided to go back to the beginning, not to quit or slow down, but to rebuild my confidence, using the simplest English I could find. I sat down at my desk one evening, opened my notebook, and wrote across the top of the page, "Easy words, strong confidence." It felt a little funny, writing that down like it was a big rule, but I meant it. I realized that I didn't need to sound fancy to speak well. I didn't need to use long, difficult words. What I needed was to speak clearly, comfortably, and with confidence, even if that meant using short, basic words that a 5-year-old might know. That night, I made a list of simple words I used every day. Go, come, eat, drink, sit, walk, run, happy, sad, like, love, want, need, big, small, good, bad. I looked at those words and smiled. They weren't special. They weren't hard. But they were useful. And I knew I could build real sentences with them. Sentences that worked. So I started practicing. I'd pick 5 or 10 simple words a day and build tiny sentences. For example, I want pizza. He is my friend. It is a good day. She likes music. We are happy. It didn't matter if the sentences were short. They were mine. I could say them out loud without fear. And when I said them, I didn't have to stop or think. My mind and my mouth were working together. Finally, I even made it into a little game. I called it Build and Speak. I would take one easy word, like, and build 5 new sentences. I like dogs, I like my shoes, I like to read books, I like sunny days, I like learning English. Then, I'd say them all out loud, slowly and clearly, looking at myself in the mirror. Every time I finished the list, I felt a little more sure of myself, a little more proud. At school, this new confidence started to show. My English teacher noticed I was raising my hand more often. She asked me to read a sentence from the book. One day, I did. I read it clearly, slowly, and with care. When I looked up, she smiled and said, "Well done, Scarlett." My cheeks turned red, but my heart was dancing. I realized something important that day. Simple words are powerful. You don't need big words to speak well. You just need to use the words you know with strength and belief. Even, "I am happy," can sound strong if you say it like you mean it. One weekend, my mom asked me to help her clean the garage. As we worked, I started speaking to myself in English. "This box is heavy," I said. "These books are old." My mom looked at me and smiled. "Practicing again?" she asked. I nodded. "Just using easy words," I said. She gave me a proud look. "They sound good to me." That day, I found new confidence in places I didn't expect, among dusty boxes and old shoes, because even in small, simple words, I could practice English. And the more I practiced, the more natural it became. I began to carry a small notebook with me everywhere. Whenever I had a free moment, on the bus, waiting in line, sitting at lunch, I would write tiny sentences using easy words. I'd write things like, "The sun is hot. My bag is blue. I want to drink water. He plays soccer." Sometimes I'd whisper them to myself under my breath. Other times I'd just repeat them in my mind. These little sentences were like small stepping stones. One by one, they helped me walk across the river of fear I used to feel when I tried to speak. I also started reading children's books in English. I borrowed some from the library and read them at night before bed. The stories were short, with easy words and simple pictures, but they taught me so much. I saw how the words I practiced every day were used in real stories, and I loved how those stories made me smile. They didn't make me feel small. They made me feel smart. Because I could read and understand them all by myself. One of my favorite books was about a cat who couldn't sleep. The sentences were like, "The cat is not tired. He jumps on the bed. He plays with a toy. Now he is sleepy." I read that story 5 times in one night, and each time I said the sentences out loud. I imagined I was the storyteller, reading to a group of children. I used my voice, I changed my tone, I added feeling, and that made me feel like a real speaker, someone who could share stories even in simple English. Over time, I noticed that my small sentences were becoming longer. I started adding details. "I want pizza" became, "I want pizza because I am hungry." "She likes music" became, "She likes soft music when she studies." "He is my friend" became, "He is my best friend. We go to school together." It was like building with blocks. First, I had the small pieces. Then I added more, and soon I was building towers. One afternoon, I was walking home and saw a little boy crying. I asked, "Are you okay?" He looked up and nodded. "I lost my toy," he said. I smiled and said, "Don't worry. Maybe someone will find it and bring it back." He looked a little better. As I walked away, I realized I had spoken with a stranger in English. Simply, kindly, naturally. And I hadn't been afraid. That moment stayed with me. It showed me that even with easy words, I could connect with others. I could help. I could be part of the world around me, not just watching from the side. At home, I told myself, "You're doing great, Scarlett. Keep going." My little sentences had become my power, and every day I added more. One word, one line, one brave step at a time. Then, one evening while eating dinner, my dad said, "Your English is improving fast." I smiled. "I'm just using simple words." He nodded. "Simple is smart," he said. That night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and said, "Scarlett, you're not just learning English. You're becoming it." And I believed it. Because I had found my voice in the smallest, easiest words. And that voice was growing louder. Now I was ready to take the next step. I wanted to use English in real-life situations. Outside my room, outside my school, outside my thoughts. I was ready to speak to people, real people, and test everything I had built. After that night in front of the mirror where I smiled at myself and whispered, "You're becoming it," something clicked. Inside me. The words I had practiced, the sentences I had whispered to myself, and the stories I had read aloud all felt like puzzle pieces finally coming together. My heart felt a quiet kind of joy, the kind that doesn't need to shout because it's strong enough to speak softly and still be heard. But I also knew something important. I had spent so much time talking to myself, practicing alone, writing, in notebooks, reading children's books, and building my confidence through simple words. And all of that was important. It was how I found my voice. But now, I needed to let that voice be heard by someone else. I needed to step out of the quiet space I had built for myself and into a space where my words could meet someone else's. Needed to speak with a friend. That thought made my stomach flutter a little. Speaking with people in real life and not just whispering to myself or repeating what I heard in songs felt like a big step. It was different. It was unpredictable. What if I didn't understand them? What if I made a mistake? What if I got stuck? But then another thought came. What if it works? That question made me feel excited. Nervous, yes, but excited too. So the next day at school, I made a decision. At lunch, I looked around the cafeteria searching for someone I trusted. Someone who wouldn't laugh if I forgot a word or said something the wrong way. And then I saw her, Lila. Lila was the kind of girl who smiled at everyone. She wasn't loud, but she was kind. We weren't best friends, but we had worked on a class project together once. I remembered how patient she was when I didn't understand something the teacher said. She had explained it to me again, slowly, gently, and never made me feel small. That kindness stuck with me. I walked over to her table and asked, "Can I sit here?" She looked up and smiled. "Of course, Scarlett." As I sat down, I took a deep breath. I decided to be honest. "I want to practice English," I said. "I've been learning a lot, and now I want to talk more, with people. Could we, maybe, talk a little in English sometimes, even just for fun?" Her eyes lit up. "Yes, that sounds great. I can help." Just like that, something began. We started small. At first, we picked one day each week. English Thursdays. Every Thursday. During lunch, we would only speak in English. It didn't matter if we made mistakes. It didn't matter if we had to stop and think. What mattered was that we tried, that we kept going, and we did. Our first English Thursday was a little awkward. We both laughed a lot because we kept forgetting and slipping into our regular language. But it was fun. It felt like a secret game we were playing, just the two of us. That day, we talked about food. It went something like this. Lila, do you like this soup? Me. Yes, it's hot. I like hot food. Lila. Me too, but not very hot. Me. Oh, I like a little hot, not too much. We giggled at our broken sentences, but we didn't stop. And something magical happened. As we talked, I forgot to feel scared. I was too busy thinking, smiling, and trying. After a few weeks, English Thursdays started to feel easy. So we added English Mondays, too. We talked about homework, about our families, about music, and about school. Sometimes we even made jokes, simple ones, but real. We made each other laugh in English, and that felt like a victory. One day, Lila said, "Scarlett, your English is getting really good. You speak so naturally now." I smiled. "That's because I talk with you." She laughed. "Well, I like our talks. They're fun." It wasn't just the practice. It was the feeling of being safe, of not being judged, of having a friend who wanted to help. Not correct me, not teach me like a teacher, but help like a friend. That made all the difference, and I realized something important. Speaking English naturally isn't just about knowing grammar or remembering vocabulary. It's about feeling comfortable, feeling brave, and feeling connected. Lila and I started trying something new. Each week, we picked a topic. One week it was weekend plans. The next week it was favorite movies. Then dream jobs, funny memories, or places we want to visit. We would each talk for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. We didn't have to be perfect. We just had to speak. At first it was hard. Sometimes I couldn't find the right words. I would say things like, "I want go beach." I want to go to the beach. And Lila would smile and say, "Yes, the beach is fun." She never interrupted. She never said, "That's wrong." She just listened and answered, and that gave me the courage to keep going. I also learned how to ask questions. That was a big moment for me. I realized that conversations aren't just about answering, they're also about asking. So I practiced questions like, "What do you like to do on weekends? What is your favorite food? Do you have any pets? What movie do you love?" And when I asked, Lila answered. And when she asked, I answered. It was real. It was alive. It was a conversation, not a lesson, not a practice, not a test. Just two girls talking, laughing, sharing, connecting. I began to feel something new. Freedom. Freedom to express myself. Freedom to make mistakes. Freedom to grow. That freedom changed everything. One afternoon, Lila said, "Let's go to the coffee shop on Saturday. We can practice English there, real practice." At first, I felt nervous. Speaking at school was one thing, but in public, in front of strangers, still, I said yes. Saturday came. We walked to a little cafe near the park. As we stood in line, I took deep breaths. I told myself, "Scarlett, you've got this. Just speak. Use simple words. Be yourself." When it was my turn, I stepped forward and said, "Hi, I want one small hot chocolate, please." The man behind the counter smiled. "Sure. Anything else?" I turned to Lila and asked, "Do you want something?" She ordered her drink. We paid, and we sat down by the window. I felt proud. Not just because I ordered a drink, but because I did it easily. I didn't freeze. I didn't doubt. I just spoke. We spent the next hour talking about school and music, all in English. Sometimes we messed up. Sometimes we laughed at our mistakes, but we never gave up. And that day, as I watched the sunlight touch the cafe window and listened to my own voice speaking softly in English, I felt something beautiful. I belonged. I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was living it. And it all started because I took a brave step and asked a kind friend to help. That step turned into many steps. Those steps became a path, and that path, made of small words, soft laughter, and warm friendship, was leading me somewhere wonderful. The cafe visit with Lila stayed with me for days, not just because I spoke English out loud to a stranger, but because of how natural it felt, like my words had finally found their way outside of me without tripping over fear. That quiet moment by the window With a warm drink in my hand and English flowing softly between us became a memory I would always hold close. But I knew something important. I still had a long way to go. Speaking with Lila helped me build real conversations. But I noticed something when we were talking. I sometimes didn't understand fast English, especially when someone spoke quickly or used expressions I'd never heard before. Even though I was learning, my brain still had to work hard to catch every word. It felt like I was always 2 steps behind. That's when I remembered something my English teacher once said. If you want your brain to think in English, you need to feed it English. Not just words, but the rhythm, the speed, the sound of how it's really spoken. That idea stayed in my head. I thought about it all week. One evening, while I was lying on my bed with my notebook and pen, I wrote down a question. How can I make English feel more like my own language? Not something I study, but something I live. The answer came to me in the quietest way. TV. That might sound silly, but it was true. I thought about how I had learned some words from songs, how my listening got better when I heard conversations in class, and how talking to Lila helped me speak more freely. But I hadn't really trained my brain to hear fast, natural English like it is in the real world. So I came up with a small plan. I decided I would start watching English shows, real ones, not with subtitles in my language, not with someone explaining every sentence. Just shows in English the way native speakers hear them. The first show I picked was a family comedy. I chose it because the characters spoke in everyday English. Not too difficult, not too fast, but not too slow either. It was a show about a girl who loved art and her funny family who always got into silly situations. I found it by accident online and it made me smile. At first, I watched with English subtitles on. That helped a little, but I found myself reading more than listening. My eyes were following the words, but my ears were lazy. They didn't try. They didn't stretch. So, I turned the subtitles off. And let me tell you, that first episode was hard. I missed a lot. I didn't understand every joke. I had to guess what was happening by looking at their faces, their actions, and the sound of their voices. But something inside me whispered, "Keep going. Don't stop just because it's hard." So I kept watching. Every evening I watched one episode, just 20 minutes. I sat on my bed, phone in hand, and let the English wash over me. I didn't stop it to look up words. I didn't panic when I missed a line. I just listened, and something interesting started to happen. By the 3rd episode, I began to notice certain words repeating. Words like, "Really? Oh my gosh, no way, I don't think so, and what's going on?" I heard them again and again. At first, I didn't even know what they all meant. But the more I listened, the more I understood, not because I translated in my head, but because I felt what they meant. The show helped me understand through context, through actions, and through emotion. Suddenly, I found myself laughing at the jokes, not just because the characters made silly faces, but because I actually got the joke. That was a big moment for me. It meant my brain was changing. It was adapting. It was learning. Soon, the voices in the show started to feel familiar. I could tell who was talking just by hearing them speak. I could even predict what they were about to say. That's how close I was getting to their rhythm. My English started to sound more natural, too. One day, while talking with Lila, I said, "No way," without thinking about it. She smiled and said, "You sound like a real American now." I laughed, but I felt proud. That small phrase came out of me without effort. It felt real. I kept watching the show every night. And sometimes I re-watched old episodes just to see how much I could catch the second time. And each time I understood more. My ears were getting sharper. My brain was working faster. There were still moments when I didn't understand something. Maybe they used a slang word or talked too fast. But instead of feeling frustrated, I felt curious. I would replay it a few times and try to guess from the situation. Sometimes I looked it up later, but I didn't pause. I didn't stop the flow. I trusted my brain to learn with time. That trust changed everything. Watching without subtitles felt like taking off training wheels from a bike. Scary at first, but once you get the balance, it's freedom. And the best part? I didn't feel like I was studying. I felt like I was living in English. The show became my friend. The characters became people I understood. Their voices became a kind of music in my mind. Soon I added another show. This one was about teenagers in high school. They talked faster and used more slang. I struggled at first, but my ears were ready now. They worked harder. They listened better. And again, I started to recognize new expressions. I heard things like, "That's awesome," "You've got to be kidding me," "Are you serious?" and "I'm totally in." I started using these in my conversations with Lila. She noticed right away. "Scarlett," she said one day, "your English is getting so good. You sound like you're thinking in it now." And she was right. I wasn't translating anymore. I was responding. I was feeling the language, not just memorizing it. One Saturday, I went back and rewatched the very first episode of the first show I had watched. I remembered how confused I was the first time, how much I missed. But now I understood almost everything. I smiled at the screen as the opening music played. It felt like I was visiting an old friend. And I whispered to myself, "Look how far you've come." That moment meant everything. It reminded me that learning English isn't about being perfect. It's about growing, about taking small, brave steps every day, about training your brain like a muscle, about trusting the process, even when it feels slow. And for me, one of the most powerful tools was turning off the subtitles and letting the language speak directly to me. Because when I stopped depending on the words at the bottom of the screen, I started depending on myself, and that's when real learning began. One quiet afternoon, I was curled up on the couch in our small living room, sipping warm tea and staring at the TV screen after finishing yet another episode of my favorite English show. The characters were now like old friends, and their words felt so familiar. I could follow along with most of their conversations, even without subtitles, and that still amazed me. But something inside me whispered that it was time for something new, another step forward, a deeper level of learning. I had trained my ears to listen better. My brain was working faster. My confidence had grown. But now, I noticed something else, something I couldn't ignore. When I spoke English, even when I used new phrases I had heard from the shows, my voice still sounded unsure. Sometimes I mumbled. Sometimes my words came out too fast or too soft. Sometimes I got stuck, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't say it with clarity. It wasn't enough to understand English. I wanted to speak it clearly too, so that people could understand me just as easily as I understood them. That thought stayed with me all day. I kept thinking about how the actors in my favorite show spoke with such confidence and clarity. Every word was crisp. Every sentence had rhythm and feeling. And I realized something simple but powerful. Those actors had practiced. They had spoken those lines many times. They had learned how to speak in a way that made people listen. Suddenly, an idea formed in my mind, so clear and bright that I smiled. What if I read aloud? Not just in my mind, but out loud like those actors. What if I used books I love and practiced speaking like them? I ran to my room and pulled open the bottom drawer of my small wooden desk. Inside was a book I had loved since I was younger, a children's novel with simple language, short chapters, and a funny, heartwarming story. It was one of the first books I ever read in English, and even though I didn't understand it all, back then I had always kept it. I opened to the first page, sat on the floor with my legs crossed, and began to read, out loud. At first, it felt strange. I stumbled on a few words. I paused too long between sentences. I wasn't sure how to make my voice sound natural, but I kept going. Page after page, I read slowly and carefully. I tried to make my voice match the feeling of the sentences, happy, sad, surprised, or excited. I paid attention to punctuation. I imagined I was the character in the book, speaking to someone else, telling them my story, and then something clicked. My mouth started to move more easily. The words began to flow without as many pauses. I didn't just read, I performed. I spoke like I meant what I was saying. I gave each line its own feeling. I was surprised by how fun it felt. It was like being on stage, like acting. But I was alone in my room with no one watching, and that gave me the freedom to try without fear. Each day, I made it a habit. I would read for 15 to 20 minutes every evening. I chose short books with dialogue, books that made me laugh or think. And sometimes I recorded myself on my phone. I wanted to hear how I sounded, not to judge myself, but to learn from it. The first few recordings made me cringe a little. I sounded shy. My voice was too quiet. But I listened anyway. I made notes. I told myself, "It's okay, Scarlett. You're learning." And the next time, I tried to speak louder. I worked on pausing in the right places. I paid attention to the rise and fall of my voice. Slowly, the difference became clear. Reading aloud wasn't just helping me speak clearly. It was helping me think more clearly in English, too. The words on the page started to feel like my own. I wasn't just copying. I was creating sound, tone, and meaning with my own voice. One day, during lunch with Lila, I shared my new routine. "I've been reading aloud from my books," I told her, laughing a little. "Like really reading. Out loud. With feeling." She raised her eyebrows. "That's awesome, Scarlett. That's such a smart way to improve. How does it feel?" "It feels like I'm becoming my own English teacher," I said. "Like I'm teaching my mouth how to speak properly," she smiled. "That's what actors do. They read scripts aloud over and over until it feels real." Exactly, I thought. Soon I began to explore other books too. I picked up short stories, poems, and even speeches. One of my favorites was a collection of short poems for children. They were simple but full of rhythm and rhyme. Reading them aloud made me smile and helped me practice my pronunciation. Some evenings I would stand in front of the mirror and read like I was giving a speech to a big audience. I practiced eye contact, facial expressions, and hand movements. It may have looked silly, but it made me feel powerful. Other times I walked around my room while reading, moving with the rhythm of the words. My room became my practice stage. The books became my partners. My voice became my guide. I even started to read parts of my English homework aloud. Essays, answers, vocabulary sentences. It helped me remember things better. Speaking the words made them stick. After a few weeks, I noticed a big change. When I spoke English in real conversations, I didn't rush. I didn't mumble. I said words with care. I took my time. And people understood me more easily. One day in class, my teacher asked me to read a paragraph from our textbook. I stood up and read it out loud. For the first time, I felt calm. My voice was clear. My sentences had rhythm. I wasn't just reading, I was speaking. After class, my teacher said, "Scarlett, your reading has improved so much. Have you been practicing?" I smiled. "Yes, at home, every day." That small moment meant so much. It showed me that practice doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes the simplest methods, like reading a book out loud, can change everything. It also reminded me that our voices are powerful tools. The way we speak tells people who we are. And when we learn to use our voice with confidence, people listen. Now, reading aloud is something I will always do, even if I become fluent, even if I speak like a native someday. I'll still read aloud, because it keeps my voice strong, my speech clear, and my heart connected to the language I love. It's not just practice. It's a way of expressing myself, a way of growing one word at a time. As the days passed, I felt more comfortable with English. I could speak more clearly, I understood more when I listened, and I was using new words every day. But there was one thing I still noticed. There were moments when I felt disconnected from the language. When I wasn't practicing, English seemed to slip away from my mind, like water running through my fingers. I could feel my confidence falter just a little when I wasn't actively engaging with the language. I realized that to keep growing, I had to make English a part of my daily life in a way that was natural and consistent. I needed something that would keep me connected to the language, something that would remind me of the words I knew and the words I was still learning. One evening, as I sat at my desk after a long day of classes and study, I picked up my notebook. The idea hit me suddenly. Why? Not write in English every day? I could keep a journal, a daily record of my thoughts, feelings, and experiences. It didn't matter if I was writing about something simple or something deep. What mattered was that I was making the language part of my routine, and in doing so making it easier to think in English. At first, I wasn't sure where to start. My mind raced with all the things I could write about, but none of them seemed important enough to fill a page. I almost hesitated, thinking that I wasn't good enough yet. My English wasn't perfect. I didn't know every word. I wasn't a native speaker, after all. But then I remembered something my teacher had told me in class. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a step toward improvement. That advice echoed in my mind as I opened to the first blank page of my journal. I grabbed my pen, took a deep breath, and wrote the first sentence that came to my mind. Today was a sunny day, and I felt happy. It was simple. Very simple. But it was real. It was how I felt, and that was all that mattered. As I wrote, I let the words flow. I didn't stop to worry about whether I was using the perfect grammar or vocabulary. I wasn't writing for a test or for anyone else. I was writing for me. I wanted to express my thoughts in the language I was learning. The next day, I wrote again. Today, I went to the park with my friends. We played soccer and I laughed a lot. I smiled as I reread the words. Even though they were short, they helped me feel more comfortable with the language. I was using the words I knew to tell a story that was true to my life. And slowly, writing started to feel like a form of self-expression. It felt natural. It didn't matter if it was just a few sentences or a full page. What mattered was that I was thinking in English. I was living in English. Soon, I began writing more than just about what happened each day. I started to write about my dreams, my goals, my fears. I wrote about my family, my experiences at school, and even my worries about improving my English. Each word I wrote connected me a little more to the language. I was no longer just learning English. I was living it, breathing it, and expressing my emotions with it. One day, I wrote about something that had been bothering me for a while. I had been feeling insecure about my English speaking skills. Sometimes I felt like I was holding back, afraid to make a mistake. I wasn't sure if I could ever speak as fluently as the native speakers I admired. But writing about it helped me see things more clearly. In my journal, I wrote, "I'm scared sometimes. I worry that my accent will make people laugh. I don't want to sound silly when I speak, but I know I'm learning. I know that mistakes are okay. I have to keep going, even when I feel afraid." When I reread those words the next day, I felt a little lighter. Writing down my fears helped me let go of them. I was able to see that my worries were just part of the learning process. They weren't something to be ashamed of. They were something to learn from. After that, I decided to write more about my language learning journey. Each entry became a small reflection on what I had learned that day, what I had struggled with, and what I had improved upon. My journal became like a mirror for me. It reflected not just my growth in English, but my personal growth as well. I also began to experiment with new words and phrases. Each time I learned a new word, I made a point of using it in my journal. I wanted to make those words feel familiar, like old friends I could rely on when I needed them. I even tried to write some creative stories, just for fun, using the words I had learned. Even though my stories were simple, I felt proud of them. They were my first attempts at creating in English. Soon I realized something surprising. Writing helped me speak better too. By writing every day, I was thinking more in English. My vocabulary expanded. I started to recognize patterns in my writing, where I often made mistakes and where I was getting better. And when I spoke to others in English, I noticed I was more confident with my words. Writing in my journal became a habit that I couldn't live without. It was a safe space for me to practice. There was no pressure. I didn't have to worry about sounding perfect. I just had to write. I could tell my story in my own way, in my own voice, and that felt empowering. I also began to write letters to myself. They were like little notes of encouragement. I would write about what I was proud of that week or what I wanted to achieve in the coming days. Sometimes I would write about how frustrated I felt with a particular word or grammar rule. But I always reminded myself that I could overcome those obstacles. And when I looked back at those letters, I could see how far I had come. Writing wasn't just a way to practice English. It was a way to keep myself motivated. It kept me connected to my journey. It reminded me of why I started learning English in the first place. And with each entry, I could see how much my language skills had improved. It was like looking at a photo album of my progress. My friends and family started to notice too. When I shared a few of my journal entries with Lila, she was amazed at how much I had grown. "Scarlett, your English is getting so good. Your writing sounds so natural now." That comment made me feel proud. It wasn't just about writing. It was about being able to share my thoughts and emotions with the world in a way I never could before. It was about using a language that felt like my own, even though it wasn't the one I was born speaking. And then one day I realized something important. Writing had helped me become more connected to myself. It wasn't just about the language anymore. It was about using the language to express everything that was inside me. It was about being real, being honest, and being true to who I was. Now writing is a daily ritual for me. I can't imagine a day without it. Whether I'm writing about my day, my dreams, or just how I feel, English is always there, as a tool, as a friend. Writing keeps me grounded in the language and reminds me of how far I've come. And I know this: no matter how fluent I get, no matter how many words I learn, I'll always write. Because writing connects me to English. It keeps me inspired. It helps me see the world through the language I love. As I sat at the cafe, my hands wrapped around my coffee mug, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. A few months ago, I would have never imagined myself in this situation. There I was in the middle of a bustling cafe, chatting with Lila and a few of her friends, all of whom were native speakers of English. The conversation flowed effortlessly. And for the first time, I wasn't worried about making mistakes or sounding foolish. I was just speaking. It wasn't just that I had gotten better at English. It was that I had learned to take risks. I had learned that speaking English wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. And for that connection to happen, I had to throw away my fears, my doubts, and just trust myself. But the journey to this moment wasn't easy. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, the road to speaking without fear was the hardest part of my journey. It was easy to listen to English, to write in my journal, and to talk to myself. But speaking to others, especially native speakers, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The fear of making a mistake, the worry of not being understood, it was overwhelming at times. For the longest time, I would avoid situations where I had to speak English. I would only speak when I had no other choice, and even then, I'd choose my words carefully, trying to make sure everything was perfect. I would rehearse what I wanted to say in my head over and over until it sounded right. But no matter how much I practiced, when I opened my mouth, the words often came out jumbled, and I'd feel embarrassed. I knew I wasn't fluent yet, and that scared me. I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to look foolish. But one day, I had a breakthrough. It happened on a random afternoon when Lila invited me to a small gathering at her house. There would be a few people there, and she asked if I wanted to come along. I hesitated. I knew there would be a lot of talking, and I was still a bit self-conscious about speaking English in front of others. But there was something inside me that pushed me to go. I had come so far, and I didn't want to let fear hold me back anymore. That evening, as I walked into Lila's house, I felt a knot form in my stomach. The room was filled with people laughing and chatting in rapid English. I tried to smile and relax, but the fear crept in. What if I said something wrong? What if they didn't understand me? What if they laughed at my accent? But then, as I looked around, I realized something important. Everyone in the room was just like me. They were all human. They had their own fears, their own imperfections. Some of them might have been speaking in English their whole lives, but they weren't perfect either. We all made mistakes, and that realization helped me take a deep breath. I was no longer afraid of being judged. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to connect. So, I decided to take a risk. I joined a conversation in the corner of the room. At first, I spoke in short sentences. I felt my hands shake slightly as I asked a question, but I didn't stop. The people I was talking to didn't judge me. They listened to me, smiled, and responded warmly. Every time I spoke, I felt a little braver. The more I talked, the less I worried about making mistakes. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain. Instead of thinking, what if I mess up? I started thinking, what if I actually enjoy this? By the end of the evening, I was laughing and chatting with people I had never met before. It felt completely natural. I wasn't focused on the grammar or the vocabulary. I was focused on the conversation itself. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. The important thing was that I was speaking, connecting, and having fun. And that was a huge step forward. After that night, I started looking for more opportunities to speak English, even when it felt uncomfortable. I joined a language exchange group where I could meet new people and practice English in a supportive environment. I also started participating more in class discussions, even when I wasn't sure if I had the perfect answer. The more I spoke, the less I worried. I realized that no one was expecting me to speak perfectly. They just wanted to hear me. I remember the first time I gave a short speech in English to my classmates. My hands were trembling, and my heart was pounding in my chest. But I stood in front of the class, took a deep breath, and began speaking. I stumbled over a word or two, but instead of feeling embarrassed, I laughed it off and kept going. I finished my speech, and to my surprise, my classmates clapped and cheered. I felt a rush of pride and relief. Speaking English no longer felt like a chore. It felt like a tool I could use to express myself, to connect with others, and to share my ideas. But the most significant moment in my journey came when I realized that speaking without fear wasn't just about talking to others. It was about talking to myself, too. As I continued to practice, I found myself thinking in English more and more. At first, it felt strange. I would catch myself translating things from my native language into English in my head. But eventually, the translation stopped. I wasn't thinking in one language and then converting it. I was simply thinking in English. That shift was profound. It meant that English wasn't just a skill I was learning. It was becoming part of who I was. I wasn't just speaking the language, I was living it. I could talk about anything, from my deepest thoughts to my favorite hobbies, and I no longer felt the need to hide behind my fear. One day, when I was talking to Lila about a new book I had read, I suddenly realized something amazing. I was speaking in English without even thinking about it. I wasn't worried about my accent, my grammar, or whether I was using the right word. I was just speaking in the same way I would speak in my native language. That was the moment I truly understood what it meant to speak English naturally. It wasn't about trying to sound perfect or impress anyone. It was about being comfortable with who I was and trusting that my language skills would grow with time and practice. The more I spoke, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the more confident I became. Speaking without fear wasn't just about overcoming my insecurities. It was about embracing them. It was about recognizing that mistakes were part of the process and that they didn't define me. Each mistake was just another chance to learn and improve, and with every conversation I became more fluent, more comfortable, and more confident. Now, as I speak English in my daily life, I realize that the most important thing I've learned is this. The only way to truly speak English naturally is to take risks. The more risks I took, whether it was speaking to a stranger, joining a conversation I wasn't prepared for, or saying something I wasn't sure about, the more my confidence grew. And that's what made English feel like second nature. So, if you're reading this and you're still afraid to speak, I want to tell you something. Take the risk. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the perfect words. Just speak. Speak without fear. Speak with confidence. Speak because you can. And remember, every conversation, no matter how small or imperfect, brings you one step closer to speaking naturally.